Narrator, calm but serious tone in 2025. Australia faces one of its toughest social and economic challenges in recent decades, its housing crisis. Across major cities like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Perth, rents are soaring, home ownership feels out of reach for most, and the dream of affordable living has become more distant than ever. But while this crisis is affecting nearly everyone, it has an especially sharp edge for new migrants arriving in Australia. Whether they are skilled workers, international students, or refugees seeking a safe home, many newcomers are finding themselves at the mercy of a broken housing market. Today, we take a deep dive into Australia's housing crisis in 2025, why it has become so severe, how it impacts migrants differently from locals, and what the future might hold. We'll explore the stories of real people caught in the middle, the economic and political debates raging in Parliament, and the possible solutions that could reshape the country. This isn't just about houses. It's about belonging, survival, and the fundamental right to call a place home. Narrator, to understand how deep the housing crisis runs, we must start with the numbers. According to 2025 reports from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, median house prices in Sydney have crossed 1.5 million Australian dollars. Even units and apartments, once considered affordable, are now well beyond the reach of middle-class families. Rent has followed suit, with average weekly rents in capital cities up by nearly 25% compared to just 2 years ago. But this isn't just a Sydney or Melbourne problem anymore. Regional hubs such as Geelong, Newcastle, and even parts of Tasmania are experiencing record demand, pushing prices upward. In cities like Brisbane and Perth, rental vacancy rates are hovering around 1%, creating bidding wars where desperate tenants outbid each other just to secure a place to live. And here lies the painful reality. While Australian-born citizens are struggling, migrants who often lack local rental histories, strong financial guarantees, or established networks are facing an even more brutal challenge. Landlords can be choosy, and in a competitive market, international students, new workers, and refugee families are often pushed to the bottom of the priority list. The statistics tell us something alarming. Australia's housing supply simply isn't keeping pace with population growth. And much of that growth comes from new arrivals who are essential for the workforce but are now trapped in a housing system that wasn't designed for them. Narrator, so, how did Australia reach this breaking point? The housing crisis has been building for decades, fueled by multiple factors: underinvestment in social housing, reliance on property as a wealth-building tool, and rapid population growth. For years, property investors have received generous tax incentives such as negative gearing and capital gains tax discounts, which encouraged speculation and drove up prices. Meanwhile, governments at both state and federal levels failed to build enough public housing to meet demand. COVID-19 also played a role. During the pandemic, construction slowed dramatically due to supply chain issues and labor shortages. At the same time, Australia's borders were closed, temporarily easing rental demand. But when migration resumed post-pandemic, demand skyrocketed. Universities reopened, skilled migrants returned, and humanitarian intake increased. Suddenly, the housing system was hit by a perfect storm: low supply, high demand, and skyrocketing costs. Urban planning is another culprit. Strict zoning laws in many Australian cities make it difficult to build high-density housing in areas where people want to live. While some argue this protects neighbourhood character, critics say it restricts supply and worsens affordability. The result? A system where property ownership feels like a privilege reserved for the wealthy, and renting has become increasingly insecure. For new migrants, the housing crisis is more than just an inconvenience. It's a barrier to integration and success in Australia. Narrator, for new migrants, the housing crisis isn't abstract, it's immediate and personal. Take international students, for example. In cities like Melbourne, students often share overcrowded apartments, sometimes with 6 or more people in a 2-bedroom unit. Reports of exploitation are common, with landlords demanding months of rent upfront or refusing to return security deposits. Skilled workers, invited to Australia to fill critical labour shortages, also face challenges. Despite well-paying jobs, Many cannot secure housing because they lack a local rental history or references. Employers sometimes step in, but in many cases, new arrivals are left scrambling for short-term Airbnb rentals, which drain their finances. For refugees and asylum seekers, the challenges are even more severe. Many rely on government housing support, but waiting lists are years long. Without stable housing, integration into the workforce and community becomes nearly impossible. Some families are forced into homelessness, relying on charities and shelters. One refugee support worker put it this way: "We are welcoming people into our country but not giving them the foundation to build a life. Without a home, how can someone truly settle?" The housing crisis is leaving migrants vulnerable to discrimination, exploitation, and even homelessness. And while their contributions to the economy are celebrated, their struggles for shelter often go unnoticed. Narrator: The crisis has become one of the hottest political debates in 2025. On one side, some argue that migration levels should be reduced until the housing shortage is resolved. They claim that new arrivals are adding pressure to an already stretched system. This view has gained traction among certain voter groups, especially those struggling with rent hikes. On the other side, economists and policymakers argue that migrants are not the cause, but the solution. Skilled migrants, for instance, are needed in the construction sector to help build the very homes that are missing. Without them, labor shortages will only get worse. The federal government has promised billions in funding for new housing projects, with a focus on social housing and rental assistance. State governments are also easing zoning restrictions to allow more high-rise developments in urban centers. But critics say progress is too slow. Building new housing takes years, and in the meantime, renters are left with few options. Advocacy groups are calling for stronger renter protections, caps on rent increases, and emergency housing for vulnerable migrants. Ultimately, the debate raises a deeper question. Should migration policy be tied to housing capacity, or should housing policy simply be reformed to match the needs of a growing population? Narrator: Behind every statistic lies a story. Meet Priya, a 23-year-old student from India studying in Sydney. Despite working part-time and receiving family support, she spends almost 70% of her income on rent for a single room in a shared flat. With little left over for food and transport, she describes life as a constant balancing act. Then there's Ahmed, a skilled IT professional from Egypt who moved to Melbourne with his family. Despite a secure job, his rental applications were rejected repeatedly because he lacked an Australian rental history. After months of searching, he and his family were forced to live in a small motel, draining their savings. And consider the case of Fatima, a refugee mother of 3 from Afghanistan. After waiting years for asylum approval, she finally arrived in Australia, only to spend her first 6 months rotating between temporary shelters. Her children missed school days, and she struggled to find stability. These stories reveal the human cost of Australia's housing crisis. For many migrants, the dream of a better life is overshadowed by the daily fear of eviction, exploitation, and financial collapse. Narrator: So, what can be done? Experts agree there is no single solution, but rather a combination of strategies. Boosting supply, governments must invest heavily in affordable and social housing. Fast-tracking approvals for high-density developments could ease shortages. Stronger tenant protections, introducing rent caps, longer leases, and stricter penalties for exploitative landlords would give renters more stability. Support for migrants, tailored programs such as rental guarantee schemes, housing advice services, and emergency shelters can help new arrivals secure homes. Encouraging regional settlement. By incentivizing migrants to settle in regional areas with lower housing pressure, demand could be spread more evenly. Harnessing migrant skills. Many migrants are builders, architects, and engineers. Fast-tracking their accreditation could help expand the construction workforce. The road ahead will not be easy. Building housing takes time, and political debates will continue. But without bold action, Australia risks losing not only its reputation as a welcoming country but also the contributions of migrants who fuel its economy and society. Narrator: Australia's housing crisis in 2025 is more than an economic issue. It's a moral test. For decades, Australia has relied on migration to grow its workforce, fuel innovation, and enrich its culture. But welcoming new arrivals means little if they are left without safe and affordable housing. The challenge is clear. Australia must reconcile its population growth with its housing policies. It must move beyond short-term fixes and create a system where locals and migrants alike can find stability, security, and dignity in housing. Because at the heart of it, this isn't just about bricks and mortar. It's about people, families, and the future of a nation that prides itself on giving everyone a fair go. And the question remains, will Australia rise to the occasion, or will the housing crisis continue to divide and disadvantage those who need shelter the most?